just to get lost in the world of a book is like no other. You'll be lying if you say, oh, I don't buy a book by its cover. People tend to like fantasy romance. I love a fantasy romance. One night after Easter dinner, the parents are brutally murdered. It's so heartfelt. This is just a really good, fun romance read to get lost into. Important to make reading a part of your life and not your whole life. Also, if you're not really feeling it and you feel like you're not gonna pick it up again, don't pick it up again. Hello book friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kaylin and I hope you're doing so lovely. Welcome to your Sunday video. Today's video, I thought I would give you guys tips and tricks on how to fall in love with reading, because I know reading has always been a love of mine. I've always been a bookworm. I've turned to books in my darkest days, the hardest times. I've turned to book when I've had no one else to turn to. Just to get lost in the world of a book is like no other. And I know reading has become kind of popular, very popular in the last 3 years. Due to COVID, people were looking for things to do, and that's kind of when book talk kind of formed. Bookstagram and booktube have been around a lot longer. I've always been a fan of booktube and bookstagram, but book talk was like a newer thing for me, obviously because it is a newer platform. But I just thought I would give you guys my tips and tricks on how I kind of fell in love with reading, and maybe they'll work for you. So if you guys want to see that, stay tuned. Make sure you subscribe, and let's get into the video. First tip I have is probably the biggest tip, and that is figure out what kind of genre you like, whether it be thrillers, contemporary, romance, mystery, fantasy. Figure out what you like and kind of just dive into it head first with that. And I have some tips to kind of help you guys do that. Like, my biggest tip for that is literally go in a library or a bookstore and just browse the shelves. You're kind of gonna cover buy, because with books, you'll be lying if you say, oh, I don't buy a book by its cover. Literally, almost every single one of us do. We go into the bookstore, what catches our eye? The cover. And we do, in fact, read the back, but the cover is the first thing we see and the first thing that kind of draws our attention to the book. So my advice is literally go into a bookstore or a library and just browse the shelves. Pick out a couple books from different areas of the bookstore, sit down and read the first couple pages or the first chapter, and whatever book kind of grasps your attention, I would go with that one, or maybe see what genre it is and go look in that genre. So for example, say you pick a book from the thriller, fantasy, and contemporary sections, and you pick the thriller, and that was the one you were the most interested in. Go put the other books back, go back to the thriller genre section, and maybe pick out a couple more and then narrow it down that way. That's how I personally do it when I'm going into the bookstore to seeing what book I want to read next or get. Another tip is do not buy books just because they are popular. There is a lot of books that go around on Book Talk especially that are very popular, and everyone has a different reading taste and style, and I just don't want you who's going into reading for the probably the first time. I don't want someone who is very new to reading to get influenced by these books and go in and maybe not like them and be discouraged and be like, well, why am I not liking these popular books? That's because everyone has a different reading taste in what they like in books. There are so many different genres and subgenres out there in books, and some of the ones that I think are probably the easiest to get into are either your thrillers, your romance, or your fantasy. With fantasy, a lot of people tend to like fantasy romance. I love a fantasy romance. That's kind of that's a subgenre, and that's a subgenre that's very easy to get into. Thrillers, you have your psychological thrillers, you have thrillers that aren't so psychological, that are just meant to be like thrilling and engaging. And then contemporary, you could do contemporary romance, you could do just straight romance. Like, there's so many different things you can choose from. I'm going to show you some books that I think would be great for people who are looking for their next book or a first book to pick up because they have no idea. Some of these books have been talked about before. Some of them are popular, some of them aren't really popular. So I just want to go over them with you guys because I feel like these are great recommendations, if I do say so myself. Here they are. I kind of pulled from each of the genres I talked about. Let's go over fantasy first. So I have two fantasies here. Both are YA. YA fantasy is easier to get into than adult fantasy. I feel like adult fantasy is more for advanced readers. If you're like used to reading fantasy, I feel like adult is like your next step. If you've never read a fantasy book before, I feel like adult fantasy could maybe get a little overwhelming for you. So YA fantasy is a good place to start. I kind of have two different ones. First one is Caraval by Stephanie Garber. And this one is a beloved trilogy for most people. I really love this. I can't say trilogy because I've only read the first book, but I really love this book. This was an easy 5-star for me. This book is so easy to get lost into. You're following this girl who has always dreamed of going to Caraval, which is this kind of game that this person puts on for 5 nights, and it's real, but it's not real. And she gets invited, and her sister disappears and becomes part of the game. And she is like, she has this partner that she's with, and there's a little bit of romance, there's a little bit of betrayal, there's a little bit of mystery, there's a little bit of everything in this book, and I really, really think this is a good first fantasy book for anyone who is looking to get into the fantasy genre. Next is The Daughter of the Pirate King. Now this was an unexpected 5-star for me. I went into this book not really expecting to love it, but I absolutely love this book. You're following this girl who's the daughter of the Pirate King, and she goes onto this ship. She gets herself caught. But really, her father sent her on this mission because she needs to find the missing piece to this treasure map, I believe. And in there, she kind of meets the first hand, and there's a little something that happens. This book is different than Caraval, but also the same. They're both part of the... There's a little bit of, they both have a little bit of romance in it, which I think is easier for people to get into fantasy if there's a little bit of romance in it. Not everyone likes it. Some people just want like a strict fantasy, which is fine. Any strictly fantasy I have is more in the adult, which is why I'm not showing it, because these are books for people who like want to fall in love with reading, and these are books I think that will help you fall in love with it. This is such an easy book to read. You sit down and before you know it, you're done with the book, so I highly recommend this book. Next, we're going to go into the thriller category. I love thrillers. It's my favorite genre, so the first one I'm going to recommend is Not a Happy Family. This book literally reads like a rich people drama television show, if that makes any sense. You're following this family who is very rich. There's the mom and the dad, I forget their names, and then the 3 adult children, and they each stand to like inherit millions of dollars. And one night after Easter dinner, the parents are brutally murdered, and it's kind of like, who did it? Did the children do it? Did someone come in and murder them? And it's just full of secrets and twists and dramatic rich people stuff. I absolutely love this book. I flew through this book, and I think if you're looking for a great thriller, this is it. You definitely will too. Next book in the thriller genre I'm going to talk about. I've talked about it again and again and again, so we're just, The Silent Patient. This is my favorite thriller. I have yet to find a thriller that compares to this book. The twist in this book was just crazy. I did not see it coming at all. It had my jaw on the floor when I found out the twist. You're following this woman who is an artist. Her husband is a famous photographer. He comes home late one night and she shoots him in the face 5 times and she never speaks again. She is held at a psychiatric hospital, and the therapist kind of makes it his goal to get her to talk again. And that's all you need to go going into this book. I love this book. I will shout it from the rooftops. Please read this book. Next genre I'm going to go into is contemporary / romance. First book I want to talk about is One Italian Summer. This is a contemporary book. This book, first off, super short. This book is a great book if you want to just sit down with a glass of wine and just read a book outside. This is the book for you. This is truly a summer read. You're following this girl, Katie, who just lost her mother, and before her mother died, they were planning a trip to Italy, and she still takes that trip, leaving behind her husband, who they're kind of on like rocky terms. She goes there, and when she has an accident, she slips and like hits her head. She sees her mom, but her 20-year-old mom. I think she's 20, or she's around that age, and they kind of develop this friendship, and that's basically the premise of the book. And it's so good. It's so heartfelt. It made me cry. It made me yearn for my mom. Like, I love this book so much, and I feel like everyone should read this book. Next is the romance genre. I am not really a romance reader, but there are a few romances I do like, this one being one of them, and that is the Soulmate Equation. I read this book in literally one sitting, and that is not like me with romances. Usually romances take me forever to get through just because I don't tend to really connect with them or really like them. In this one, we're following Jess, who is a single mother, and she's had a hard time letting people in. She doesn't really date anymore, but when she hears about this matchmaking DNA thing, she goes and does it, and she ends up matching with the founder of the company, and romance blossoms. This is just a really good, fun romance read to get lost into, and I recommend it. Next tip I have for you guys is find a reading routine. Finding a reading routine is really, really important. You're going to need to find out when you like to read, where you like to read, what time of day you like to read. So, for example, you could read maybe 30 minutes before bed, or 30 minutes while you're eating your breakfast. Just literally anything. I personally love reading after work, a way for me to unwind. I don't even touch my electronics. I come home and I pick up a book for 30 minutes to kind of decompress from the day, and then I get on with like my evening routine. I also really love reading before bed. It's one of the places I get my most reading done is in bed. You don't even have to read for 30 minutes. You could read for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, even an hour. You can read however much you want to, but just finding that time in your life to create a space for reading, I think, is really important. Also, it's important to make reading a part of your life and not your whole life. I think it's very easy to get influenced by all these creators that read like 20 plus books a month and think, oh my God, I've only read one, so now I have to read, and that's just not feasible. I don't know how they do it, honestly. I'm like, what do y'all do for work? Because I know I can't. But I just think it's really important to find a reading routine and to not make it your whole entire life. Next tip is engage with your book. Here's what I mean by that. That could be finding someone to buddy read with. Buddy reading a book, it just makes the reading experience so much more fun. It makes you motivated to read too, because you guys can be like, okay, let's read up to chapter 5 and then we'll discuss. Or you guys can just like discuss on the way, and you guys can set up like reading dates where you read either in person or via FaceTime, Zoom, whatever. It just makes reading the book so much more fun because you have someone to talk to with it. I know personally I love buddy reading. None of my real life friends love to read, so I find people online to read with and kind of discuss things with, and it just makes it much more fun because I can be like, oh my God, did you read this part, and what did you think of this and this and that and that and that, and it's just so much fun. Another way you could engage with your book is if you come across a line or a page in the book you really like, take a picture of it or write it down in your notes app, or even highlight it if you want to. A lot of people annotate their books. I do as well. I love nothing more than highlighting a favorite line, and then that way I can go back through the book and flip through it and see like, oh my God, I really love that line. It just makes the reading experience more immersive and makes you more into the book and into the world of the book than just like reading a book and not really engaging with it. That's fine if you just want to simply read the book and be like, huh. But I just think it makes it more fun if you engage with your reading. Last tip I kind of had for you guys is read multiple books in multiple different formats. And what I mean by that is maybe read a book via audio or ebook or physical book. So like audio you could do while you're driving or doing housework or just working, whatever you're doing. Physical book could be like when you want to read physically, and like an ebook could just be like when you're traveling or, you know, can't bring a physical book with you. An e-reader is definitely much more smaller and lighter than a book. So for example, this is my current read physically. This is Chain of Irons. We are a big, thick bad boy, and I don't necessarily want to take this book with me. So I have my e-reader. I currently don't have any ebook that I am reading right now. It's actually dead. But this is great to have when I'm traveling because I don't necessarily want to bring 10 books with me when I can just bring this with preloaded books. So much easier. I'm also listening to The Ballad of Songbird and Snakes on my phone, my audiobook. I listen to that book when I'm driving, when I'm doing housework, when I'm getting ready. I listen to it at work if I'm at work by myself. It helps the day go faster. And also it helps me like mood read, because I'm a mood reader. So if I'm not in the mood for like a fantasy book, then I'll go to like read my audiobook. Or if I'm not in the mood for that, I'll go read something else. Another thing is have books in different genres. Don't have them all in the same genre, because then it can kind of get confusing. So like don't have 3 fantasy books going at once, because you're kind of be like, okay, well, which world is this and what's this and I don't understand this. It just kind of gets confusing. So have them in different genres will also help you, because if you're like reading a book and you're not really feeling it, put it down. It's okay to put down a book and pick something else up. There is no shame in putting the book down. Also, if you're not really feeling it and you feel like you're not going to pick it up again, don't pick it up again. DNF it. It's fine. It's okay. Pass it on to someone else who would like it. That is 100% okay. So yeah, you guys, those are kind of my tips and tricks on how to fall in love with reading. I hope this helped you guys. I hope you guys liked this. If you did, make sure to give it a big thumbs up. Make sure you guys subscribe, because I would love to have you here. If you don't already, you can follow me on my social medias. They're always linked down below for you. I'm on Booksta and Book Talk. And I hope you guys are doing well and reading lots of good books. And I will see you guys in my next video.